everything paranormal. Para-X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and merry part, bright the cheeks and warm the heart, but tread the circle thrice about to keep unwelcome spirits out. Bide within the law you must, in perfect love and perfect trust. Mind the threefold laws you should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. These 8 words the read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome. My guest tonight is Denny Sargent, and we'll be talking about his new book, Werewolf Pack Magick. Now, Denny's a writer, an author, how about artist, better, yes, and university instructor who has a master's degree in history, intercultural communications. He's been involved in various esoteric traditions and groups, including Welsh traditional craft, voodoo, Shinto, and a variety of pagan groups. And he's also, with being an author, he's got 10 books out there and a couple of more that he co-authored, but including Werewolf Magick and the Book of Dog Magic. He's also contributed to magazines and anthologies all over the U.S., Japan, and on paganism, Western occultism, spells, folklore, magic, and tantra. Now, for any newbies to the show, we welcome questions and comments to the guest during the live chat room on paraxradionetwork.com. And if you're listening, it's Thursday Night Live, and you're not in the chat room, come on over and join us. All right, with that, all that business and all my tongue-tying stuff going on today, welcome, Denny.
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, I love the book. It's such a neat book, and it's not what people think. You know, okay, so it's a shapeshifter's book of shadows, and there might be some people who aren't familiar with shapeshifting, or they might have watched too many movies and gotten the wrong impression about shapeshifting. So since I said the word, let's explain a little bit about it.
All right. So the first book that came out was called Werewolf Magick, so people who are interested in it in the subject might want to read the first book first. But the second one is really for groups and fits well with your theme and what you're doing here in terms of the craft. And I am a 3rd-degree Welsh trad witch, so I'm, among other things, and a Thalamite and a tantric and all these other things. But really, I think the first thing, since I'm on your show, the first thing I want to say about shape-shifting and werewolves and lycanthropy and whatnot is very few people know this, but you probably saw this in the book. During the witchcraft persecutions in the Middle Ages and from about 1400 to about 1700, about half the people who were arrested for being pagans and being witches and persecuted and often murdered were also accused of being werewolves. Mm-hmm. And almost nobody knows this, and almost nobody says anything about it. But I did a lot of serious research. I'm a historian. I have a master's degree in ancient history. I'm not a complete, I'm not just making stuff up. And there's been an integral connection between the craft and paganism and shape-shifting, and specifically lycanthropy and werewolfism. Werewolfery is what they used to say. So I think it's really, people think it's kind of a weird thing, even when I talk to my friends who are witches. But I say, look, this is part of your tradition, because really it goes back to animism. And animism is the origin of almost all religious traditions. It came out of the Paleolithic era. again, I'm quite serious about this. I have my master's degree in this stuff. And the animism is the basic idea that everything is alive, or almost everything, that nature is full of spirits and beings that are not us and are not clearly, part of our world, except when we have a way of looking at the world that sees everything as alive. So, trees have spirits and certain mountains have spirits and so on. And most of this animism and this idea of these spirits are very fluid. For example, I lived in Japan for 4 years. I was an instructor there at a university, and I also studied Shinto, and Shinto is about animism. So, for example, Mount Fuji has a spirit, is a god, is considered like a god, a deity. And certain trees have shiminama, which are ropes that have some things hanging down from them. And that indicates, there's a spirit there, there's a spirit here. And it was fascinating when I studied this in Japan. I thought, okay, as someone who's been a witch since he was 14, I was initiated at 14, if you can believe it, in New York City, in the Welsh tradition. And of course, as a witch, I've always believed that trees have powers, and we've done rituals, talking and working with trees and different things, and that there's the god and the goddess, but there's also many other forms of life and many other spirits. So a lot of what we've been doing, and a lot of what in the pagan community and the craft community and the occult community, it sort of has built on animism and built on all these things. It's not uncommon in pagan traditions, I'm sure you well know, that there were multiple deities, multiple gods, multiple spirits that are worked with,
Mm-hmm.
I know a number of witches who belong to different covens, and some are Celtic, and some are like ours was a little bit different, and some are interestingly enough different as well. For example, there's a whole new pagan tradition that's coming up in Poland and the Baltics, and I've gotten to talk with these people. So coming back around to Werewolf Magick, you're wondering, like, where is he going with this? I find it fascinating. What happened with me was, even though I've been a pagan and I've been on these things for a long period of time, I didn't really delve into shapeshifting, though I hung out with a number of shamans from Siberia. A friend of mine was bringing them to Washington State, to Seattle, to present at the University of Washington. I got a chance to hang out with them, and I got a chance to take part in several of their workshops, and I got to interview them. And at that time, I was an author for Pangaea magazine, which I don't know if you remember Pangaea.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I was a regular contributor. I had my own column called A Worldwide Paganism, which maybe you remember. I don't know. That would be kind of cool. Mm-hmm. But anyway, my goal was to and what I did was I interviewed people from all over the world who were living pagan priests and priestesses. So, for example, a Santiara and a voodoo priest, and I interviewed a kahuna from Hawaii, and I got to interview a shaman from Siberia, from the Nani-Doro people in Siberia, and I got to learn a lot about what they do and how they interrelate and their pagan practices, and they involve shape-shifting. And unfortunately, in our culture, we're very materialistic, and Judeo-Christianity has pretty much set the tone for how things are believed or not believed, right? Mm-hmm. And no matter how pagan you are, you can't escape Judeo-Christianity in America. So shape-shifting, what it means is, we're talking to shamans who actually did this sort of work, and then talking to other people like kahunas in Hawaii and people who are possessed in voodoo, and all sorts of other. I've interviewed many other people, many other pagan traditions, and this is a normal thing, and goes back to animism. So the bottom line is, the shamans in Russia, and the shaman I got to interview, Nadiazhda, bless her heart. She was an amazing person and powerful person. When they talk about shape-shifting, they talk about several different things, but the main thing is going into a deep trance state and letting their other self rise up and take over. Meaning, how do I explain it? I'll put it in terms for werewolf magic, because what I'm doing is not shamanism. I am not a shaman. I merely have researched the techniques that they use, and I fell into it, as I'll tell you in a couple of minutes. But the idea is to shut down your brain, your ego-centered upper cortex brain, and allow a spirit to come into you. If you're working with that modality of, like a Voodoo or in Shinto, where the priests become possessed, quote unquote, they allow a spirit, a nature spirit, to come in and work with them and help them. And it's essentially the same thing with werewolf magic. We shut down our brain. It's not possession per se, but you shut down your upper brain. That is your ego that keeps telling your entire being, oh, I am this person, and this is what the world is, and it's all very concrete. Is to allow nature to enter you usually with the help of a spirit or a power or a form, and as it takes possession of you, or as it fills you. I prefer that better than possession. People have such a weird view of that. That you enter a different state of consciousness. You're still you, but you're in a completely different state of consciousness. And I do this every full moon. I have a group of people that do it. And by the way, my coven used to do this, but in a different way. My coven used to do it when the high priestess became possessed by the goddess during the drawing down of the moon, which I assume you're fully aware of.
Mm-hmm.
That the priestess would become possessed by and become the avatar of the moon goddess, depending on whichever name your coven worked with. You understand what I'm saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and everybody I know who's been in the craft that has really a legitimate coven that works with their tradition has seen this and has experienced this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's essentially the same thing. It's not anything different. What's spooky, what makes it kind of spooky, and I guess sells books, is the term werewolf magic, because it the term were means human, man, right? It comes from the old Saxon or the old Norse. Where and then wolf, or wolf, is obviously wolf. And the reason why the term werewolf is used is because just like Shinto priests, just like witches, just like the shamans that I've been talking to you about, the ancient Norse, the Vikings, would do the exact same thing, to turn into berserkers, right? It's all tied together. This is nothing new. It's just simply I did the work on doing deep research in it, and by the way, I cite everything. I treat it like a very serious academic work to a certain extent, and then it gets a little crazier.
Well, everything needs a little bit of crazy. I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna jump in for a second because we got a couple of questions from the chat room, and
all right.
Actually, you might be sort of a mind reader, because the first question was, is there a difference between a were and a shapeshifter? Is that the were can only change into one specific animal, but the shapeshifter can change into anything?
Okay, that's a really good question. So it depends on the culture, and it depends on your relationship with the spirits. So, for example, the Vikings, the two most potent spirits that they worked with was the wolf and the bear, and there was a subset of Viking sorcerers who were also warriors, and they would the term we know the most is berserker, right? Which comes from berserk, which means the bear spirit, and to sark means to wear the skin of the bear, quote unquote. And that's what shapeshifting is described as in Norse tales and their writing. So there were two kinds of berserkers. There were the bear sark, who wore the skin of the bear. That is, they took on the entire personality and power of the bear and shut down their human brain. And then there was the wolf sark, and those were the wolf berserkers, and they quote unquote wore the skin of the wolf. So there's a wonderful movie that just came out actually called The Northman, and I highly recommend it because it has the absolute best. Aside from the fact it's told from the pagan point of view of the Vikings, it's a wonderful movie, beautifully done. But there's a great scene. There's a great scene of initiation into like the werewolf cult, the bear cult or the wolf cult. It's a really well done scene. It's classically shamanic. The priest, there are ethnogenic mushrooms and things that are partaken of, and people, and in this movie, people either decide, the warriors either decide to shapeshift into a wolf or a bear form. Of course, they don't change actual form. When me and my group do this, we're still the same. We don't grow fangs and claws. I wish that would be the coolest thing in the whole
Wouldn't
world.
it? Yeah.
And plus, it gets cold, and it'd be nice to have fur growing. No, we go into a deep trance state, like shamans that I've been with and seen and watched them go into deep trance state, and things happen. Magical things happen. So I was with a group of shamans in Guatemala too, and they caused a whirlwind to happen, like a cyclone to happen inside a house. I mean, I was there. I saw this. They all went into this trance state, and this stuff happened. So this is magic, and if you're on this show, I assume you believe in magic. So this is just another form of magic, and it's not anything particularly different or spooky. If you delve into the history of witchcraft, you will find werewolves. You will find images, and you will find lots of pictures that the church came up with, showing witches flying, but in the shape of a wolf. And it's part of our tradition to work with animism, to work with nature. We believe in nature. We worship nature, right?
Yep.
I mean, if anybody who's a witch or pagan and says they don't worship nature, they're not deeply embedded in nature. It's kind of, there's something weird there.
Yeah.
But so really, this is not that far out. And in fact, I've been interviewed by several witchcraft podcasts that started off very hostile to me until I was able to explain it the way I'm explaining it to you. And I point out to them, I'm like, look, here, I'll show you pictures. Like, so many witches were accused of being werewolves because they were shapeshifters. Because in those days, being a witch, part of it was going into trance states and was being something like a shaman and helping people and healing people. And this is what shamans do still today in Siberia. They go into a trance state. They can see what's wrong with the person's body. They can leave their body, and they can enter the underworld and pull them out if they're very ill. Or they do all these sorts of things that witches did and witches were accused of, right? And what witches still do. I mean, if you're a witch or you're a pagan, one of the things you should be doing is knowing herbs and plants and know how to help. Know how to, when people come to you and say, I don't know what to do, I'm ill, or I need help, be able to do fortune, do maybe tarot or I Ching or something. Our job is to be psychic and to be able to enter what's called the liminal world, right?
That's right.
The twilight world. Well, the twilight world is where the werewolf lives. I mean, that's where that process lives. When we go into that trance state, the only thing that's really obvious is that we physically enter it, we physically act differently, and we enter a state of calm, absolute calm peace, because our brain, all our anxiety, all our constant thinking and about what might happen, could happen, all that stuff in our head, work and everything else, it shuts down. And in Werewolf Magick and in Werewolf Pack Magick, I'm very, very explicit on how this works, and I even talk about the what Carl Sagan called the dragon brain, the lower primate brain. We basically are shifting down into our lower primate brain, and we're shutting down our higher brain. It's not terribly complicated. It's been done for thousands of years, and there are many people doing it now. It's just that I stumbled on it outside of witchcraft and shamanism. I stumbled on it because I had a horrible, about 5 years ago, I had a horrible divorce, and I lost my job, and I lost like everything. I lost everything. And I was deeply ill, and I was at the end of my rope, and I was losing my mind, and I didn't know what to do. And I literally started to get suicidal, and I was still meditating every night, but I didn't know what to do. So I was meditating, and all of a sudden this wolf spirit started showing up in my mind meditation. Now, I do what most people do. I create a very solid circle around me when I meditate and do work. And so there should be no spirits walking into my circle, right?
Right.
And this wolf kept showing up, and I just kept ignoring it. And finally, after a week of it, I finally just looked at it when I was meditating and said, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" And it looked at me and said, "You've been calling me. You've been calling me, and I'm here to help you because you're on the edge of losing it completely. You're on the edge of something, you're going to end up extremely ill or dead or something. You're at the edge of your rope, and I'm here to help you. Your pain invoked me." And I was like, "All right, I got nothing to say about this." I said, "Okay, well, what should I do?" And it was very explicit. It was this wolf, very, very nice wolf. It wasn't scary with blood or anything. And it's just like any spirits that we've ever worked with. But it was very, very clear. And it came right up to me and it said, you need to get into nature. You need to get out of the house, get out of the apartment. You need to go into the woods, like deep woods, and you need to let go. You need to let go of all the crap that's destroying your mind, and you need to let your animal out. You need to let your and I will show you, and I'll help you. And that's exactly what happened. I just ran into the woods and tore up all my. I'm in Washington State, right? So I went up into the mountains. I tore up all my clothes and ran into the woods and said, "Well, okay, if the cougars and the bears get me, then that's how it's supposed to roll." And this wolf spirit showed me how to shut down my brain and let my animal self come out. And once I did that, I was completely free of all anxiety, all anger, I was just an animal. And the minute I entered that state of pure animal consciousness, not thinking about tomorrow or work or anything else, right? Once I hit that place of just being a very open, unconscious animal, all of a sudden Gaia opened to me. Nature completely opened to me. And I saw the trees and the vines and the forest alive, fully alive, like writhing light and like the energy that flowed up from the roots up into the trees, and that the trees were communicating to each other. And I went wandering into the woods, like deep woods, right? And I walked right up to animals. Like I walked right up to a raccoon, and I was no longer seen as something other or dangerous. I suddenly had stepped over into being one of the animals in the forest, and therefore none of the animals were worried about me.
Nice.
And I was able to see, and feel and absorb the pure energy coming from Gaia, from the earth. And when I finally came out of this like fugue state, you know, and you know, I realized I was freezing, and I went back, you know, to my little campsite, and I was like, holy moly! I mean, I won't use the SH word, but that's what the first thing that I yelled. I was like, that was one of the most amazing and important ritual events I've ever done. And you know, I'm 60 now, and I've been a witch since I was 14. So I've been through a lot of occult stuff, and I've seen a lot of stuff, and I've been in some amazing rituals. But I've got to say, this was not like anything I'd ever done.
That's amazing.
So I went back home, and I was like, okay, now what do I do? Because I thought I knew everybody would think I was out of my mind, right? Even my friends who were occultists. I have friends who are, you know, in the OTO. I have friends who are Golden Dawn. I have friends who are witches. I have friends who, I wasn't going to tell anybody any of that stuff because I thought they're going to think I'm out of my mind. So I started writing everything down. And the wolf spirit kept coming to me. At that point, we were bonded. And then later on, after I'd done a lot of reading on animism and on other stuff, I realized it's very common. In fact, I went back and looked at some of what the Olchi, the shamans from Siberia had told me, which is that you're tagged by the spirits come to you. You don't go to the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
in other words, a lot of, it's now common nowadays. People say like, oh, I'm a tiger, or oh, I'm a lion, or oh, I'm a snake. Like, I like these animals, therefore they're my spirit animals. But that's not the way it works in shamanism and animism. Mm-hmm. They come to you. They show up in your dreams, or they come and start talking to you. That's how shamans are chosen. They suddenly hear the voices, or they come to them. So I didn't know any of this. But this wolf had come to me, and when I said, well, why did you come to me? It said, you've been calling me, and I'm supposed to be with you, and I'm here to help you. And I'm like, well, why not an otter or, you know, a deer? It's just like, no, I'm supposed to work with you. Like, you know, the spirits generally think we're very dense because things in nature, these things are thousands of years old, and we used to be interconnected with all nature. Native Americans talk about animals as people, you know.
Yeah.
They call them the elk people and the deer people and the bear people. And shamanic people in tribal cultures, within Native American tribal cultures, had a stronger connection with the spirits of these animals than other people. And yet we have zero connection. You know, Judeo-Christianity has taught us that we are not animals, you know, and yet we are. You know, we clearly are. And in fact, I tell this to people when I lecture, and some of them get upset. I say, look, we are 78% genetically the same as wolves, and we're 98% genetically the same as chimpanzees. And some people get very irritated by that. We are animals, but Judeo-Christianity has lectured us that God has set us above the animals, that we are in charge of nature, that God has given us dominion over the beasts and the animals and nature, to do it as we want, because we are different. We have souls and they don't. Whereas you know, I've traveled the world. I've been to maybe 20, 25 countries. After living in Japan, I moved all over the place. I traveled all over the place. And I'm telling you, most cultures believe that animals have you know, are intelligent, have power, are important, you know. And they, just like Native Americans, would go hunting for food, but would thank the deer or elk, you know, that they killed, and honor that as a being with a spirit, you know.
Exactly.
And most people do, like in Japan, people do. They see animals as having spirits. They see trees as having spirits.
Everything has spirits. And
almost everything, right?
Yeah. And I'm going to have to interrupt you for 1 second because we're getting ready to take a break. But if in like 2 sentences before we get there, and then I'm going to have another question when we come back. She said, is animism considered a religion, or is it more a general life belief?
It's considered a religion by anthropologists. The term I use nowadays is neo-animism, and that's actually the next book I'm writing. Because it's not a religion in the sense of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. It's not, but it is a religion. It is a religion. Mm-hmm. I mean, religion comes from the term religios, which means to relink. So, I mean, anthropologists and sociologists consider it a religion. Okay. Aboriginals in Australia are animistic, and I would say that that's a religion to them.
Mm-hmm. So you're right. All right, let me tell everybody I'd already told everybody it's time for a short break. So everybody hunker down, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Cool.
Cauldron will be right back, so don't go away. If you end up with webbed feet, remember, you've been warned.
Are you looking for a supernatural radio show that is informative and fun? A show with topics such as ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic energy, spirits, cryptids, and more, hosted by paranormal investigators with years of investigations under their belts? Then look no further than The Calling 2.0, powered by the Sim Crew, hosted by paranormal investigator Jerry and psychic medium Valentina, along with others. Tune in on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, only on the Para X Radio Network.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. Covenant House is the national leader providing safe housing for youth, 50 years strong. Every youth who walks into Covenant House gets clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. So, look closer at Covenant House and help us fight youth homelessness. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening in to Stirring the Cauldron. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up if you don't already know about the free weekly Witches Oracle deck readings that I post on my website every Monday. Now let me answer the age-old question before you ask it, which is, well, how do I know it's for me? And the answer is pretty simple. If you weren't meant to see it, you wouldn't know it was there. So if you're curious about what the week has in store for you, pop on over to marlabrooks.com every Monday and scroll down on the homepage, and there it will be.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
And my guest tonight is Denny Sargent, and we're delving into his new book, Werewolf Pack Magick. All right, so I'm going to jump into that question that's been sitting there for a while.
Go for it.
She wants to know, how is the practice different than, say, animal forms of martial arts?
Well, I would say that's an interesting question. I think that I have watched people do animal forms in martial arts, and I think that actually is an interesting technique and might be something that would actually connect with what I'm doing or what Werewolf Magick is all about. But they're different in the fact that when you're a martial arts person, I've done some martial arts. I know a lot of people who are very into it. You're still conscious, like you're even though you are conscious and your brain is functioning. When you've done enough katas that you don't have to think about what you're doing, that's your autonomic nervous system. That's part of body memory, So I don't know. It's an interesting conversation to have. When we do Werewolf Magick, our goal is to we concentrate on our Dan. This actually connects with it. Dan Tien are what people call the fire chakra in their gut, and how there's a whole bunch of things that through tried and true methodology help us like shut down our upper cortex our constantly yattering brain and open up our more primordial brain, our lower cortex in the lower part of the brain. Now, when you're doing martial arts, actually, when you've done katas and you are to a point where you're not thinking, when you're sparring with someone, most of what you're doing is automatic. You're not thinking, oh, I need to put my hand here or my leg there. So in a sense, it's using a similar part of the brain that we're using in Werewolf Magick. We're using that part that's just the body connection, the lower autonomic nervous session. What do I want to say? Autonomic nervous center of the brain. So I guess there's some crossover there. It's kind of interesting way to think about it. We do certain things to go into this trance state. We rock. We growl, so we do different things. That we sway, very much what berserkers did, what other shamans and other people around the world have done, swaying, rocking, howling. You know, we go through a lot of these things that are. They're not things you have to think about or cognate about. They're things like rocking and swaying, and doing in different positions. My books have everything in them. Werewolf Magick has the history, because there's a very deep history of werewolf cults. There've been werewolf cults from ancient Greece and Egypt throughout all of Europe. I have so much information; it's all documented. So I think there's some similar things. Now, what's interesting is, since you brought up martial arts, I've been connected with some people in China, where in China the shape-shifting animal that is still very much part of the Chinese Taoist magic is the tiger, and a lot of the techniques they use and a lot of the things they do are extremely similar to what I'm doing. And I'll stop there because I'm not an expert in it, but I've done enough reading. The other one is the fox spirit, which is huge in Japan and also in China. And I just read a marvelous book on shape-shifting in terms of the fox spirit. So I think it's important to note that around the world, many cultures don't think what I'm talking about is crazy. It's only Judeo-Christian cultures and Islamic cultures and cultures that have a very strong monotheistic thing to them. Like, I mean, for example, in Morocco, I traveled throughout Morocco. It was interesting to find out that there weren't werewolves, but there were were-hyenas. And people were quite clear and quite serious that, yes, there's a lot of people in Morocco who can do this, who can shapeshift into and take the spirit in. In Japan, I met a number of people who were talking about kitsune, the fox spirit, and like, oh yeah, there's Shinto priests who are possessed by that. There's also tanuki spirits. There are were-tanukis in Japan. Tanuki is like a raccoon dog, and there's were-cats. You know, I mean, this idea that people can shift or be possessed by or channel this animal side of themselves is pretty. I mean, it's pretty common in Thailand and Laos and Cambodia and China and lots of places that I've been. I've talked to Russians who absolutely believe in werewolves, and that people that there are these sort of shamans, not just in Siberia but other places, especially bears in Siberia. In Russia, it's the bear spirit that is common. Anyway, it tends to be alpha predators around the world is the shapeshift, like tigers in China. Anyway, that's more than probably you wanted to know. But it was a really interesting question, so it was fun to talk about.
Yeah, I've got good people asking good questions. And the book is not what people are going to think. And, when we're talking about Werewolf Pack Magick and any other path, I mean, each path has their gods and goddesses, and as I'm going through your books, the book, I saw very many things that were familiar, like rituals to Artemis and Hecate and Selene.
Right.
And you have other gods and goddesses, but I was kind of interesting, the Lord of the Forest and the Great Wolf Spirit Ra, because when Ra comes up in my head, it's the Egyptian mythology, king of the deities and father. Yeah.
No, it's not the god Ra. That's wrong. We growl to invoke the wolf spirit. It's Ra, like that. It's not Ra as in the sun god. And when we invoke this, and so really it's very primordial, and it fits almost every single witchcraft coven. We invoke the goddess of the moon, right? We invoke the Lord of the Forest. You can call him whatever you want. You can call him Keranos, you can call him Hern, you can call him Pan, right? We just call him the Lord of the Forest. And then we invoke the Earth Mother. And which we use the term Gaia a lot for the Earth.
Yeah.
So there's nothing really different at all about what we're doing, except we go absolutely primal when we do it. We don't say, "Oh, Hecate, come." We don't do that. We invoke the moon goddess as Ah. We invoke the Lord of the Forest as Ah. We invoke the Earth Mother as Ma. We invoke the werewolf god, the werewolf spirit as Rah. So we don't talk. We don't talk when we go into shapeshifting because we let our wolves come out, and wolves don't talk. So everything we do is growling, howling, and when we invoke the gods and goddesses, I can walk you through it if you want. It's very simple. When we rock, and we sway, and we go growling, and sort of just rumbling is what we call it, like right, and then we banish our circle. We don't draw a pentagram. We just go 9 times, and we just project ourselves, our animal self, out, basically saying, any spirits that are not supposed to be here, be gone. Any energy, be gone. Then we start by invoking the mother. Once we go into a trance state, we get down put our claws into the earth, and we go, Ma, 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 for a long period of time. As the Earth Mother reaches up, we all have had visions of the Earth Mother, the eyes of the Earth Mother opening and bringing us energy and helping our shapeshift. Like the energy comes from nature, comes through our bodies from the earth, right? And then we reach out to the trees because we're surrounded by a forest, and we invoke the Lord of the Forest, and we bring that energy into our shapeshifting, and we go ah, 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 and we extend these sounds, and then we inhale, and we bring the Lord of the energy into us, right? And then we reach up to the moon, and we usually wait till the moon is full and in the sky, and we reach up to her and we go ah, 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 and we feel her energy come into us. We see it. We literally see it and feel it, and it comes into us with every time we inhale. And at this point, we are also visualizing our body shifting into a werewolf form, into a wolf form. Now, it's not really happening, but we feel it, and we can see the astral image of each other as wolves, as werewolves. And then we, once we're in that deep trance, we just relax. Sometimes we drum a little bit. Sometimes we we do something that is actually one of the more amazing things that I didn't expect it, and until I had a group of people to work with, I didn't know it was a real thing. But we'd all howl, right? We howled. Howling is the way to release all of it and thank the gods and to honor them. It's like a prayer, right? So we'd all go, oh, right? Except when you get a bunch of people doing it, what I found out was you hit certain tonal notes that vibrate in a way that opens up an entire new liminal space. So we're all going, oh, but if you can imagine, like 6 people all going, ooh, all of a sudden it sounds like 100 people. And the whole circle suddenly just sort of explodes in this silent opening of something that is utterly different, and I cannot explain it. I can't really talk at this point. I really can't talk about the experience because at that point we're in purely feral animal self. You know, we're not people anymore. We're not intellectualizing anymore. We stop thinking. We stop planning. We stop thinking about, you know, what I'm going to watch on TV tonight and what I'm going to have for dinner. We're shut down that part, right? And we're just existing. And one of the things we all notice is that we can all see very well in the dark, like really, really well. And we can also see the light in the trees and the interconnection between the trees, and you can see like squirrels and animals that we couldn't see before. And often we just sort of sit around, we just lay around. I mean, we sit in the dirt, or we wander in the trees, or we just hang out. I mean, we just go into a state of just sort of animal bliss, you know, and there's not much else to be said, to be honest.
Well, you know,
then we come out of it the same way. We, after several hours, we just kind of all look at it. We all we have this, we don't talk, but we all kind of can talk to each other without any talking. And we all look at each other, it's like, oh, it's time to leave. And then we do what I told you already, but we do it backwards, and slowly but surely we let our animal self descend back down into our unconscious mind. We let the wolf kind of collapse down into us, and we let our puny human self come up, and slowly but we rock, and we do those things like I said to you before, like ah and ha and rah, and then we kind of end it, and we earth it, you know, with the mother, of course, and we bring it all down, and then we come out of it, and we howl, and we vanish, and then we all give each other a big hug, and then we talk about it, and we feel utterly refreshed. And this is the most amazing thing, and why I tell people, look, you might think this is a bunch of crazy stuff, but you should try it. Because shutting down your human brain for a little while is the most refreshing thing I've ever experienced in my life. It's like, I guess, I don't know. It's like being like floating on the ocean for 3 or 4 or 5 hours and just not thinking of anything. And the next day after we come together and we do this work, the next day we feel 100% better. I mean, now there's other things you can do within once we've created this space and we're in the werewolf, the wolf spirit, like state of consciousness. My book, Werewolf Pack Magick, and my first book, Werewolf Magick, which kind of sets the stage and the history. There's lots of rituals and spells that you can do, and there's a ton of them. In fact, the Werewolf Pack Magick is an entire book of shadows. It has an initiation. It has spells to protect, and spells to heal, and spells to help, spells to do, and rituals to honor the dead and to marry people. And I created we channeled all this stuff. It's an entire book of shadows. It's got everything.
It does. I mean, it's amazing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think people should know that, it's very much like what we practice. My path is pretty much the same. It's just a little bit different. But you do, magical God chants. You do astral icon. There's an astral icon spell. There's all kinds of. I mean, very similar to what everybody else does, just in a little bit different way. But
that's right. It's more animistic and a little bit more geared toward working directly with your animal self as opposed to other things. So yeah, it's not so different from what people think. And anyway, I also have a website that I have tons and tons and tons of more stuff, and people can contact me, and it's werewolfmagick.com, magic with a K at the end. werewolfmagick.com. My name is Denny Sargent. You can also get to my website. It's dennysargentauthor.com. And honestly, if people can't afford the books and they're really interested, they can certainly contact me, and I can work something out with them. Because I'm not doing this to make a lot of money. You don't make a lot of money with occult books.
No, we don't.
But I'm very happy to help people who are interested. So anyway.
And your website is really interesting because you've got a blog, you've got books, you've got workshops, you've got lectures, and what kind of got me interested too is the Werewolf Magick Oracle deck.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad.
I mean that's very cool. So I mean there's so much in here, and again it's not what people think right off the bat, but. And, I'm going to just say this for a minute because we're going to have to go pretty soon. But, when you were talking about the growling and the howling and everything, as I was reading in the book, you said that there's howling, there's growling, there's low growling, there's up growling, there's yips, and there's barks and body movement. Right. This is how animals do it. They don't talk to each other. So, as I was reading it, I said, that's kind of, I could visualize it that you don't need to speak to somebody in that way. I mean, in human talk, you could.
That's right.
So I got that out of it, and I could just see, understand it. Because sometimes
I think it's important to note. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
it's
important to note that human beings, and I teach. I've taught university for 30 years, right? And the last 20 years, I was a teacher trainer. I taught linguistics. I taught grammar. I taught how to teach. I taught pedagogy and methodology. I mean, I'm not a complete flake. I'm only some of the time am I a flake. But one of the things I discovered in terms of going deep into history is that we didn't start using language until a very short time ago. I mean, meaning like 10,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. But for most of the time that Homo sapiens was around, or not necessarily Homo sapiens, but hominids of various kinds, we didn't have a spoken language. The spoken language has done amazing things to advance us as a species, but it also has blocked off, our animal side and our intuition, our insight, and our gut feeling, Mm-hmm. And so, I talk a lot in the books about the wildness, weird, and way, and about these things, about being. Once I started going into the state of consciousness and going into nature, and going into the woods, like the real woods, I realized, wow, we have Native Americans probably do, and a lot of tribal people do, but we really have no clue about nature. We just see it as like trees to cut down, and oh look, there's this and that. But once I'm in that feral state of being in a trance state, and I go into the woods, it's fully alive, and not only is it alive, but it's full of light and energy and power. And when I enter in that state of consciousness, I am accepted as part of that. I am accepted as part of Gaia. And this is what a lot of tribal people keep trying to tell us. Like, Chief Seattle from Seattle, he's known as Chief Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote some amazing things, but one of the things he said was, you people came here and you fear the forest, and you build all these fences and stockades to protect yourselves from the wild animals in the forest. They are our friends. They are people. We don't fear the forest. We don't have walls around our places. We don't have fences because we talk to them. They show us what to eat and what not to eat. They tell us how to do things. You know, they teach us and show us and reveal to us how to survive. And you are blind. You white people are blind. You don't hear the animals. You don't see the animals. You don't learn from them. You don't learn from anything. You know, you don't learn from nature, and therefore you are just doomed to destroy nature. I mean, this. I mean, I read these things years ago, but going into this trance state and being able to do my werewolf magic and become part of nature again. I mean, I literally cried the first time it happened. I was like, I have been so utterly and completely, even as a witch since I was a kid, right? I have been so utterly and completely separate from Gaia, from nature, that it wasn't until I could shut my brain down and just be an animal that all of a sudden I saw and experienced and felt. I could put my hands on a tree and feel the flow of energy and sap through the tree. And like, why couldn't I see this all along? Because my brain, my cortex, my ego is so busy creating stuff that it's not perceiving what's around us. I mean, anyway, I guess that's the most powerful thing I've gotten from it is I look and feel younger than I have in years. I can unload all my anxiety by simply shutting down. I go around telling people, you should try this. It's way better than like drinking heavily or whatever. I mean,
or Xanax, yeah.
Or Xanax. Yeah, like that. Okay.
All right. All right. You know what? Time goes too fast. I want you to give your website out again where people can find you. And really, it's a really interesting website, guys.
Thank you. You can find me at DennySargentAuthor.com, but the easiest one to remember is Werewolf Magick and Magic with a K at the end.com, or Feral Magick with a K.com. And my blog is Feral Magick. I think if you just looked under my blog, Feral Magick, you would find me. I have all kinds of stuff there. I have hundreds of things that I've written. I'm all over the map, actually. And I currently have a new book out on Tantra because I'm an initiated Tantric as well, called Tantra for All, and that's in my blog as well.
Good.
So, yeah, I do a lot of stuff.
Yes, you do. So, take an afternoon off and go visit his website. Seriously, I got stuck there for a while today. All right, we got to go.
Way, happy full moon. Happy huge full moon.
Yes. And thank you for joining us and sharing. And
thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, listening and your great questions. And until next time, everybody, blessed be. And again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2009.
You have been listening to the Para X Radio Network.